Good morning, crusty crew. Be kidding. Hey, besties. Welcome to the live. Happy Transit Chat Sunday. Let's get into it. Bow, bow, bow. I see y'all in the chat. I see y'all in the queue waiting for me. Thank y'all for being here. Happy Sunday. Yeah, we have lots to discuss because if you've been following me for a while, I have been waiting for this particular transit, Mars and Virgo, to set it off in this mother. And I've actually even made some notes. I got 2 pages of notes that are not finished, which is part of the reason I'm running late. But I should have enough here to work with and at least a formula for how I want to discuss the things that we're talking about today. But first, hello to everyone in the chat. Good morning to Dr. Deb. Good morning to Priya. I say good morning, even though it's noon, but good afternoon. It's barely afternoon, right? Hey, bestie. Good morning, Samaje. Yay, KJ is here. Hello, hello. Good afternoon. And yes, did y'all have a good weekend? Mine has been good so far. I am very tired because I was out late on Friday, but did nothing yesterday, put myself on forced physical rest, and then plan on going for a bike ride later today. So I'm excited about that. I cannot wait. I can't wait. I don't know that I have any updates. The usual, like the video, subscribe to my channel, follow my Patreon, follow me on socials at Mix Mercury everywhere that I be if you don't already. And my books are open for April and possibly even September at this point. For August, and possibly even September at this point, since you can usually book about 60 days in advance. So if you haven't already taken up a spot in my schedule, please do that. I would love to talk to you. Ciao. All I have done is work and follow up on Love Island nonsense constantly. And I did want to talk about something not totally related, or maybe we'll find out later that it's related to our conversation today. But a lot of people have made a good point about reality shows in general and the people that they have on as representation or whatever on socials. And I hadn't considered it from this perspective for whatever reason, but I asked a question a few lives ago about what it means to consume something within context. And I don't remember exactly what I said about one of the cast members getting taken off the island because of using a racial slur in her Instagram stories long before she was on the show. And I was asking the question, like, how relevant is this to the show itself if this was something that happened years ago that she apologized for, but then gets brought back up in the present day as an excuse to remove her from the show? So somebody else who was on this series of reality shows like Perfect Match and Too Hot to Handle, which are Netflix's versions of Love Island adjacent reality TV. Someone who was a cast member herself made the point that it's actually a good thing and really important that people are, or rather that this behavior is not tolerated in any case. And then I think because so often people on this show, like, they're not allowed to talk about politics, then, and a lot of their political social beliefs get kind of erased or hidden from the show. And then you're off the show, you're following these people, and then you find out that they have behaviors that are problematic. Then of course you're like not wanting to promote those people, not wanting to give them more visibility and more attention than than what they deserve, if your goal is to not promote those kinds of behaviors in any context. So she had more to say about that, and I wish I could remember what the TikTok was, but I know her name was Dominique, and she was talking about her experience of dating a guy who was definitely racist and homophobic and sexist and misogynistic and everything else on her series, but all of that got edited out from the actual show and then just made her look like she was blowing a lot of things out of proportion, when in reality she was responding appropriately to the things that she was experiencing firsthand, but us as the audience aren't privy to any of that information because it got edited out. And in fact, now that I'm saying it out loud, this is relevant to today's conversation. So, um, yeah, I just wanted to circle back and say that it is important, actually, the people who are given any kind of media time, attention being centered in our media, in our TV shows, because we are subconsciously absorbing information from these people, and we're subconsciously absorbing what we believe are and aren't social norms and what should and shouldn't be acceptable in society. So I had just been thinking about that. I meant to say something last week and I forgot. So bringing it back up today to say that, yeah, actually, we should have a zero tolerance for stuff like that. And public apologies should be made to just say that, hey, this is not how we fucking behave. So anyway, what are we talking about today? These two people that I've listed in the title, Venus and Gemini and Mars and Virgo. Venus entered Gemini on Saturday, right? Saturday? Um Saturday or Sunday? I mean, Saturday or Friday? Sorry, I forgot already. Yeah, Saturday. Venus entered Gemini early Saturday morning. So that added another planet to the rule of Mercury. And then tomorrow, excuse me, Mars will enter Virgo for another planet for Mercury to be in charge of. So we've got 3 planets in the sky right now. Well, tomorrow, Monday, the 28th, July 28th, we will have Jupiter and Venus in Gemini. And you know, when Jupiter and Venus get together, they do the most. And then we'll have Mars in Virgo by tomorrow. Um, also ruled by Mercury. So the first planet that I want to talk about that we've been talking about but haven't really succinctly described is Mercury in Cancer. Mercury is currently retrograde in Cancer, and Mercury will also conjoin the Sun in its retrograde Cazimi moment later this week on, I think, Thursday. Confusifying. Everything just got way more confusifying. So true. July 31st, the Sun will conjunct Mercury late at night, like right around 11:30 Central Time. We'll also have Venus square Saturn on Friday, August 1st. So, yeah, Mercury been doing the most as the ruler of Jupiter, especially, but Mercury been doing the most in its little retrograde dance. And I wanted to sit and really think about what it means for a planet to be ruled by a sign that is not its own, and for Mercury specifically to be ruled by Cancer. So when a planet moves into a sign, it is taking on the characteristics, the tasks, the behaviors of the sign that rules the planet that rules the sign that planet occupies. So let me say that again. When a planet moves into a sign that is not its own, that planet is going to take on the characteristics of the planet that rules the sign it just entered. I know that's confusing. So if Mercury moves into Cancer, Mercury is doing Mercury things like the moon would do Mercury things. Weird, right? So that means Mercury behaving like the moon means that Mercury might be a little moody. Mercury's Mercury is, well, let me just talk about it how I wrote it down. So Mercury on its own, just doing its own mercurial things, typically consumes and shares information without accounting for context or implied meaning. So just on the surface, Mercury says, "Oh, look, something new to learn about, something new to talk about, something new to discuss." Something that Mercury could stand to do more often when engaging with information is to, one, consider the source. So who is talking about this? Who did the study? Who's providing the evidence that we are discussing? Considering the source, would be something that I think is more Jupiterian in nature because the source provides more context to the information being shared, right? If Coca-Cola is doing a study on aspartame, then or if Coca-Cola is the source that is sharing information about aspartame or that is funding studies conducted about aspartame, and you know that Coca-Cola uses aspartame in Diet Coke, then there's going to be some bias likely presented potentially. Or we at the very least know that Coca-Cola would have a vested interest in the outcome of a study about aspartame because they use that sweetener in their products. So considering the source would be a form of contextualizing information, right? That's something that I feel like Jupiter does. It also adds meaning or adds, I don't know, a reason why there would be not adds a reason, but it adds meaning to the study. Like there's a reason why we're looking into this because people consume Diet Coke. Some people consume a lot of Diet Coke multiple times a week in in substantial amounts. Something else that I feel like is kind of more Jupiter related that Mercury could stand to do or that we could stand to do as people as mercurials, right? Whatever, is to also consider the motivation for why certain information is shared or withheld. Jupiter is all about the why. If Mercury is the what is it? Jupiter is the why. So, considering the motivation for why somebody might share the information that they share or withhold the information that they aren't sharing. Um, Same thing with that aspartame study. Like, why would we want to study the effects of aspartame? Why would Coca-Cola want to study the effects of aspartame and then help someone publish an information article about the effects of aspartame? Well, because they're trying to make money off of it. And it would look really bad if Coca-Cola was selling you something that was a poisonous substance that has long-term bad health effects. This is not me saying that aspartame does or doesn't do that. I'm just using it as an example that I've heard talked about a lot. So, um, normally, considering the source, considering the why, the motivation for why we do share and talk about and discuss the information that we discuss, normally that would be a way that Jupiter functions. But right now, as we know, Jupiter is in a Mercury ruled sign. So Jupiter is behaving more like Mercury in this case. And instead of digging deeper and searching for context, searching for deeper meaning, Jupiter is just amplifying and spreading and exaggerating sometimes even whatever claims are circulating in the media, in our conversations, so have you. So, um, not only is Jupiter behaving more like Mercury, but Saturn is also behaving more like Jupiter. So Saturn normally likes to restrict and um, create boundaries, draw lines between what is real and what is not, what is perceived, what is made up in your head, or what is something that is from your personal experience versus just what something is without meaning. But because Saturn is acting like Jupiter, Saturn is trying to find deeper meaning and using these meanings as a way to draw boundaries and to decide what is real and what isn't. So, not super comfortable for Saturn to function in this way, but sometimes it is necessary for Saturn to move through a Jupiter ruled sign so that we can in some ways like concretize or at least come to some kind of collective consensus that can come to some kind of collective consensus about what is true at least in this era of or rather at least until the next time Saturn returns to Pisces, right? So over the next 30 years we are deciding during this Saturn and Pisces transit what things mean and what's true and what's real um to us as a culture and as a society right now, taking into consideration all the things that we've experienced and all the things that we will experience during this transit. So it's laying down a lot of foundations for what is true and what is not. Um, but again, because Jupiter itself, at least in 2025, is doing Mercury things, we're not so much, I think, creating, well, I'll say it like this. If Saturn is relying on a Jupiter that is behaving more like Mercury, then I don't know that we are so much. Hey, Madison, I don't know that we are so much. In some ways, we are creating new meaning, obviously, because we're having new experiences. But there's something about it that feels like it's constantly in flux because it's Jupiter ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is constantly fluctuating. Like Mercury is constantly learning something new. So it feels like just this constant intake of information. And then the Pisces of it all is not knowing which information is actually telling us the truth or which information is. There's a contradiction between we're receiving a lot of information and we're also not being given a lot of information. Both of those two things are happening at the same time with Jupiter and Gemini and Saturn and Pisces. And I feel like it's really confusing because, on the one hand, like I said, constant influx of information, everybody's constantly talking. Um, new information is constantly coming out. And at the same time, we're not being given the full story. So it's hard to assign meaning to this influx of information. So we're kind of just taking it in passively and filing it away for later. And that's kind of all that we can do with it because we can't establish consensual meaning whenever we don't have all the information. And so it just leads to us being kind of fickle, kind of constantly changing our minds, um, having to reroute and move in a different way because now we've got new information to work with. And I think for a lot of people, it's also just like wanting to tune it out. Like, I think there's a lot of wanting to tune it out and wanting to just ignore everything that everyone's talking about because what does any of it mean anyway? It all sounds like gibberish at this point. So I think a lot of Saturn and Pisces and Jupiter and Gemini is, on the one hand, people going la 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 la, and then people being on the receiving end like la 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 la. And you just gotta figure out how to work with whatever little bits and pieces feel like they make sense to you based on your life experiences and what's real to you. That's where the whole self trust and intuition thing comes from. Because when you're just being flooded with a whole bunch of information that you have to sift through, the tools that you're using to sift through is your own experience and your own personal patterns that you recognize. And you just kind of got to work with what you got. So that's where we're at on this high level, right? Then you add in this whole Mercury and Cancer thing where Mercury is taking on these lunar qualities. And so using information as a way to regulate yourself, um, or ignoring information as a way to regulate yourself, overly consuming information as a way to regulate yourself, and also as a way to feel like you're in control of what's going on. So I think on the personal level, consuming information as a way to regulate is like, okay, hopefully, like if I can just learn more, especially because it's in this trine with Pisces who feels like they don't have enough information. We're just like, oh, taking in as much information as possible to try to make sense of things so that I can regulate my nervous system because I feel like I don't have enough information to figure out how to navigate life. So that's part of that Pisces Cancer trine right now. And then um whenever you consider the people who have power right now and you shift into the control aspect of Cancer, the people who have power right now are also trying to control and in some ways regulate or attune our nervous systems to what they want us to believe is true and real. Enter fascism, enter propaganda, enter Sydney Sweeney ads talking about having Sydney Sweeney being on these, who is it, American Eagle or somebody's ads for their genes, talking about she has good genes. And the context being that it's literally, um, considering that it's literally, sorry, getting derailed by comments in the chat. I'll be with you in just a moment, Heridio. Um, basically receiving ads that are basically Nazi propaganda, right? I'll circle back to that. But yeah, we're being fed information that makes us feel like we have a grasp on what's going on, right? Telling us maybe what we want to hear or telling us what sounds good. No, we're not in a recession. It's just blah 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 that makes it seem that way, right? Or um people just blatantly lying about what's going on. And just lying about what's going on politically, or just not telling us what's going on politically, removing all of the data about bird flu, removing all of the data about COVID, removing all of the data about vaccines, and removing vaccines entirely, and feeding us information that's saying, oh, we're taking this away from you because you don't really need to worry about it, or it's wasting resources, or whatever it is. It's spending it costs too much money for us to keep reporting this information, so let's just take out all of these different departments and trim the fat, so to speak, so that we're not wasting resources on unnecessary information. Whole time, the information is necessary. So people in power using information as a way to control us by manipulating us emotionally, and then also us just with each other in our day-to-day lives, maybe um again consuming information as a form of numbing or avoidance, or avoiding information as a form of numbing or avoidance. And yeah, that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. So that being said, the other aspect of Mercury behaving more like the moon, and Mercury itself already being a planet that's constantly shifting and changing, is that also the way that we're responding to information at any given moment um, changes depending on the mood that we're in that day. And also the meaning that we give to the information that we're consuming changes depending on the mood that we're in that day. Or the information that we seek out depends on the state of our nervous system that day. If you're feeling really anxious, you're going to be searching for some kind of information that will soothe your nerves, that will make you feel like you're in control, that will make you feel like you're safe. If you're in a really good mood, you might receive some bad news, but because you're in a good mood and you're feeling good that day, it's not going to take you out. It's not going to like ruin your day. You might have a more positive outlook on that situation. Or if you're in a bad mood, you might just be looking to fight literally anybody in your mentions on Twitter and responding with a level of hostility, or your partner says something a little bit confusing to you and then you lash out at them. Like, there's so many different ways that the state of our nervous system at any given moment also informs the meaning that we give to the information that we consume, right? So all of these things are happening at once with Mercury moving through Cancer. And so on some level, I feel like the intake of information during this time, during this retrograde, is like overwhelming, overstimulating, and and just too much. And a lot of us are just trying to deal with that. So how do you navigate a situation that feels like information overload, and especially when the information being provided is stuff that you don't really have control over? Or if you're having to bear witness to things and learn about things that you don't have any control over, like, how do you respond? How do you digest that information? So that's like kind of a big overarching question that we're dealing with. And then you add in Venus and Mars, Venus and Gemini, and Mars and Virgo. And this is where I'm kind of starting to see Gemini as the villain in this situation, which I didn't expect today. As a Gemini, usually I tend to feel pretty neutral towards Gemini as a sign. I feel like it's the least problematic. And yet, I feel like Gemini, being at times naive and susceptible to influence and susceptible to other people's comments, especially if Gemini feels insecure about what it already knows and like struggles to trust itself, then you can become somebody who is now propagating and prop disseminating information. Don't play with me, Madison. You know, it's the least problem. Who would be least problematic? Who would be less problematic than Gemini? Like, be so fucking for real. Who would be less problematic than Gemini? I think it's noisy and annoying and sometimes confusing, right? And like I said, kind of frenetic and insecure, but problematic? I don't know. I don't know. But today we will kind of see, I think. At least whenever it comes to Jupiter and Venus occupying Gemini, how in the wrong hands that may not be the best combination. Not Sagittarius, I guess. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so um Venus, if we talk about Venus next, our newest member in the Gemini section of the sky, Venus typically likes to connect people, bring people together, and unite people based on aspects of identity and different concepts that are generally geared towards assimilation in a way that would um in a way that would wait, I can't read my handwriting. Hold on. Normally, Venus unites, connects, and brings people together based on identity and concepts, and those identities and concepts are geared towards some kind of assimilation to a norm or a rule that keeps society together, right? Or keeps a relationship together. It does so, of course, by using signs like Taurus and Libra. But when Venus is in Gemini, Venus is having to behave more like Mercury. And so, in order to bring people together, Venus and Gemini has to be open to multiple people's perspectives and personal anecdotes and ideas and listens to other people as a way to bring people together. Listens and shares other people's stories, even as a way to bring people together. And it networks and it learns as a way to connect and unify. In this condition, I think, like we were kind of talking about earlier, Venus, along with Jupiter, is changing norms and rules based on this new information and based on these new perspectives, which sounds great, right? Like we are making an effort to consider what other people are telling us a little bit more with this transit. However, um, again, Mercury itself is ruled by is in Cancer, being ruled by the moon. So Venus and Gemini in this case is trying to connect based on information that feels good or information that sounds good, or Venus is using this kind of using this information that we know is coming in meant to control and regulate or attune our nervous systems in a particular way um to connects us based on information that's being used. Yeah, it's using this information that's already being used to control and manipulate us, basically to bring us together. So that really just makes me think about, like we talked about last week, like subliminal messaging, or like we talked about with this ad. So now I can talk about the ad. I believe it's American Eagle. If it's somebody else, y'all let me know in the chat. But there was an American Eagle ad for their new line of jeans, and they used Sydney Sweeney, who's blonde hair, blue eyed, big chested girl from Euphoria, or from uh what's that other show, from White Lotus. If you saw White Lotus, for whatever reason, she's known for her boobs, and they used her in this ad to basically say Sydney Sweeney has great genes, like using genes as a play on word for literal genes, but also genes, the same genes that give her blonde hair and blue eyes and big boobs. So curious what you think about the South Park episode. What South Park episode? I don't really watch South Park that much, sorry. But I would agree that Gemini is a chaos agent. So yeah, so this ad, I feel like, is a great example because one, it's a play on words and puns, which feels very Gemini to me. And it's also using these specific indicators. If we go back to Mercury and Cancer and having conversations about the body, creating new meanings around bodies. Hello, with Mercury and Cancer being ruled by Jupiter, then we're also using these words and phrases as a new way to describe bodies or to talk about talk about bodies and what certain bodies mean. So in this case, this ad is literally saying like, hey, this is an example of what an attractive person with great genes looks like. And on the surface, it looks like they're advertising genes and it's not that deep. But when you consider the larger context of us literally being in our fascist era as a country as a Western country, after a pandemic where we were told many times over and over that the vulnerable would be left by the wayside and survival of the fittest, and if you just aren't in good health, you're probably going to succumb to this virus and there's nothing we can do about it. We have to move on with our lives. Like, you have to bring in all of that extra context to understand why this ad is not just an ad for jeans and not just a harmless play on words. Like, so whenever I talk about Jupiter being in a position where it's not really considering the context, literally people coping by saying like, this isn't fascist, this is just an ad. Another thing that I saw come up in the last 24 hours was an article about Japanese scientists, and sorry, I didn't read the article, but Japanese scientists doing genetic research have found a way to delete whatever that means, have figured out a way to delete Down syndrome from chromosomes, right? If you've been paying attention to eugenics and you know anything about eugenics, that's a huge fascist dog whistle. But then you got people who I would assume are well-meaning, but are probably problematic in other ways, who knows, saying like, hey, we're not talking about like sterilizing people with Down syndrome like how they did eugenics in the 1910s or whatever. This is talking about like stopping it before it even happens. It's not the same as fascism, because fascism would be aborting babies or killing babies or babies with Down syndrome instead of stopping Down syndrome before it starts. And it's like, okay, I can see, unfortunately, why you would think that that's on at face value not the worst thing in the world, because if you have it in your mind that having a disability means that your life is going to be more difficult, then you would want to prevent people from having a difficult life, right? Wrong, because now you're considering that the disability is the problem versus the society and how it responds to people with disabilities. So this is kind of where Venus and Gemini comes in, because if everyone is talking and they're saying things like the vulnerable will fall by the wayside, survival of the fittest, great genes, looks like somebody with blonde hair, blue eyes, and big tits, and then it's actually okay to want to eradicate intellectual and physical disabilities before they even happen. Like, what are we talking about? If that same if that same article were to say, Japanese scientists have figured out how to eradicate blackness from chromosomes, like have figured out a way to make people not have black skin by deleting this chromosome, would you be okay with that? Unfortunately, some people would. Similarly, if you were to say, we figured out how to eradicate white skin from people's chromosomes, people would have a fucking fit. But because disability is something that capitalistic society in the West has decided is inferior or not good, then for some reason we think it's okay to then want to literally erase those types of people from the world, which is bonkers whenever you consider the implications of that. Because if you do it with Down syndrome, you're going to do it with anything else that you could find a genetic link for. You can do it for gayness, you can do it for transness and queerness, you can do it for whiteness, for blackness, for Mexicanness, for literally whatever else, whatever other genetic links you can find to identity and personhood, because you want your society to look a certain way. That's literally verbatim eugenics. But for some reason, people are not seeing that. They're not catching that. They just think, oh, this is like, morally neutral. And it's literally not, because you think that you're trying to alleviate suffering when the suffering is not there is a level of suffering that comes from, not physically being able to do certain things, but it's not purely just because of the disability itself. It's because nobody is willing to fucking help you in an individualistic society. live any kind of quality of life. They'd rather just cast you aside and say sucks to suck, you know? Um, the disability obviously doesn't go away just because there's accommodations, but your quality of life could improve based on accommodations, which is a social thing that we agree to do based on the norms of a particular culture or society, right? That's like whenever I first came out as gay or bi or whatever to my parents, and they're immediately afraid for me because they're like, "Oh, your life's going to be more difficult." And like, well, my life's not more difficult because I'm gay. Loving other people is not making me gay. And then same thing with transness. Like, yes, being trans and having like, you know, body dysmorphia and all this other stuff, like gender dysphoria, all that other stuff is uncomfortable. It sucks, but my entire quality of life doesn't have to suck just because of those things that I deal with on the individual level. It sucks because walking around in the neighborhood is dangerous if somebody knows that I'm trans. It sucks because they want to deny people healthcare. It sucks because they want to charge you exorbitant amounts for a surgery that would make you feel better in your own body. That's the reasons why it really sucks. And the rest of it, you can kind of find ways to cope with it that make sense to you as an individual where you live. But all of this to say, yes, Venus in this position during this particular era of our lives is kind of reinforcing these new meanings, or rather making things meaningless as a way to connect. And if you're a person who tries to impose more meaning into these conversations, people are probably going to be like, you're deep in it. Why? Like, don't deep it. It's not that deep. It's not that serious. You're making a big deal out of nothing. And then what does that lead to? That leads to you potentially not being well received. I think if Mercury were in a different position and adding that depth into these conversations didn't freak people out and dysregulate them emotionally, then maybe we could get somewhere. But I kind of feel like Mercury in Cancer with Saturn in Pisces, for a lot of people who are feeling the anxiety and the chaos and the depression and everything else of this moment, would rather lean into things that feel good, or at the very least not pay attention to the things that suck because it's too much and we don't know how to process it individually, right? But again, on the flip side, at least in our individual one-to-one relationships and the things that we can control, um this is a combination that could be used for expanding, getting out of your echo chamber, expanding your perspective, and using other people's experiences as context or as a way to um, broaden your perception of something versus being more kind of narrow-minded and super evangelical and overzealous about it in the way that maybe Sagittarius would in this situation. So probably something we'll have to consider later this year when Jupiter moves into Cancer and planets move through Sagittarius. But in the meantime, um, using it for good would look like actually listening to disabled people, listening to trans people, listening to Black people, immigrants, like whoever is under attack right now, whatever marginalized group is under attack right now, and amplifying their voices because they are providing a context that's being withheld or left out by the people who actually have power right now. Y'all follow me? Let me see what y'all are saying in the chat because I know I missed a lot. Um, um, Krydia, if you want to discuss things in your specific chart versus these like larger general conversations that I'm talking about on live, my books are open and I would love to discuss. Okay, so hey Sloan. Okay, this South Park episode, Trump penis with googly eyes episode. Yikes. Hey April. South Park did an episode targeting Trump in a very explicit way. Interesting. I'll have to look into it to comment on it because I have not seen it at all. I'm surprised I haven't even seen any clips for it, but very interesting. Oh, the discussion is about the intentional dog whistle. Double talk, Gemini talk we've been getting. Yes, that's a good way to put it, doublespeak as well for Gemini. This is some Brave New World shit, yes. And yeah, they're still trying to find the genetics of autism, which is also scary because they want to manipulate genes, which is like, please stop. Please stop. I feel like I can recall allegedly RFK Jr. was trying to solve autism before this upcoming fall, and I have a feeling it's tied to vaccine access and a lot of people being denied vaccines. I think the anti-vax of it all is really just like a red herring or a justification for them to look into these other things because they want people to get sick and die. Like, they believe in their own eugenics bullshit of survival in the fittest when Charles Darwin even said that's not what that means. And if people die, like, they just don't care if people die. And then, in fact, it's more beneficial for them to people to die because then they can just get rid of anybody who knows anything about anything. And then the only people that are left are people who agree with them. Like, there's a bunch of different ways that they can use that to their benefit. But yes, it is tied to vaccine access, and all of the misinformation spread about vaccines. Hey, Cosmos. Hey, Jim. Okay. All of this is happening around my birthday and it sucks. I'm sorry. Okay, so moving on. Now we got Mars and Virgo. And I've been waiting for Mars and Virgo since sometime last year, whenever I first saw that we were going to have a Mutable Madness summer. And now that it's about to be here tomorrow, I'm really going to miss Mars and Leo because we're about to be all kinds of discombobulated. I fear. I think in some ways we'll be discombobulated, but I also feel like Mars and Virgo might be really necessary for us to start combating a lot of this misinformation. But we're going to have to ask the cards about that in a minute. So, because I would just like to know. I'm sure y'all would like to know as well. So Mars, normally on its own, reminds us what makes us different and unique and serves as a protective force over our body and our identity. So where Venus likes to bring people together based on social norms and different identity markers, Mars serves to protect and separate us from others despite our similarities, despite the things we have in common. Mars is the one that's willing to say, like, hey, I am different from you. And so what works for you don't really work for me. All right. Excuse me. And if what doesn't work for you doesn't work for me, we're all either going to have to change to fit me, or I'm going to have to go. That's what Mars is for. Sometimes you need that because sometimes the herd wants to jump off the cliff and you're like, I'd rather not die or get severely injured. So I'm not going with y'all. Either none of us are going or I'm not going. Right? That's what Mars does. Mars rebels against control and desires to be self-led. So it rebels against control. It can rebel against authority as well. Sometimes Mars is like, hey, I gotta go my own way. But when Mars is in Virgo, Mars has to behave more like Earth Mercury. So Mars uses things like tangible and evidential information, and things that it literally witnesses with its own eyes to make decisions, draw conclusions, take actions, and protect itself from others. New paths are forged. Oh, new paths forward are carved out, and different choices can be made based on tangible information with this planet and with this particular transit. So to me, that seems more optimistic because at least, like, you're trying to make an effort to trust what you're actually seeing and what can be tangibly and measurably discussed. But again, we're running into this issue where we don't have context for the information, for the things that we're seeing, for the experiences that we're having. So it gets tricky, right? And this is why I'm kind of like, I don't know if this is good or not, because adding in another mode of discernment, in this case being Earth, is helpful in a sky that's mostly been air and water so far. as far as the mutables are concerned, Pisces and Gemini. We're adding in this earth element that I think makes things feel a little bit more, like I said, tangible, concrete, observable, measurable, right? And at the same time, even science and facts and data can be manipulated depending on a person who has the power and the control over that information. So this is where we get into the sextile between Cancer and Virgo, because now it's like, okay, Earth kind of deals with withholding in a similar way that I think Saturn and Pisces is dealing with, because Saturn is all about ignorance and um, withholding in its own ways. Earth is also about withholding, removing things, um, refusing to share in some ways sometimes. So if you're withholding data, you're withholding truth, you're withholding evidence, then people become easier to manipulate because one, they're going to be searching for answers. And two, they might be more willing to accept whatever answers they can find. Um, Again, because at the end of the day, Mercury in Cancer is trying to help us regulate by using information. So, um, you know how people talk about, like, when you're in a relationship with somebody and they are trying to decide whether telling you this particular bit of information is going to be conducive to the conflict that you're having, or the feelings that you're having, or the experience you're having in the relationship. And you run into this question of, okay, does it make sense for me to share this with this person, or is this just going to make things worse? Right? If you are trying to protect and preserve your own life and body by either sharing or withholding information or evidence, then in some cases, yeah, it might really make a big difference to the relationship for you to share this really important information, because it's like, in its own way, it provides additional context that you didn't have before. On the other hand, sometimes, you either tell a white lie or you leave out certain bits because it maybe softens the message, or it um, keeps the other person from crashing out, or it explicitly lying about it too. Yes. Or, there's just a number of ways where you can kind of manipulate or manage, or kind of control the other person's reaction to you by the information that you do and don't share. So sometimes you do want to hit them with the receipts and the screenshots and say, look, I know you're cheating on me, bitch. I got the receipts. But if you're the person cheating and you've already like gone through and deleted some messages within that thread and someone sends you a screenshot, how would you know? Like, okay, so on the one hand, you have someone being like, look, I have the screenshots. Like, the girl that you're cheating with literally sent me these screenshots. You're cheating. But then the girl who sent you the screenshots already went through and deleted maybe parts of the things that she said to this man, deleted her parts of the conversation, sent you the screenshot. So now you think you're going off of what looks like facts because it got hard evidence of a conversation that they had whole time. She's removed maybe even things that he said or things that you said. He could be trying to prove that he's not cheating and agreed that him and the other girl are going to remove certain parts of the conversation, show you the screenshots or show you the text message thread. Now, how do you know? How do you know if you can even trust the screenshots? There's also just taking the screenshots out of context. Have you ever had someone either send you, or you've sent a specific clip of a larger conversation specifically to make the other person look bad, whether you realize it or not, to either make the other person look bad or to make yourself look like the I don't know, more reasonable or more calm person in a larger conversation, where maybe just before that you were crashing out, calling the other person out their name and trying to get a reaction out of them, and then you clip this particular part out of context. We see YouTube videos do this a lot, conversations on TikTok do this a lot, articles, like we said, do this a lot with clickbaity titles and things like that. So now we kind of run into this issue where, yes, you're trying to use evidence as a way to protect yourself, or you're trying to use evidence as a way to defend yourself, but we still run into this question of evidence without context, or evidence without all of the details of the entire conversation, right? Um, So we're back to this question from the very beginning of considering the source and considering the motivation or considering the why this particular information is being shared or not. And I think whenever you add in the Virgo of it all, you also add in, I was going to say something else, but I'm going to stay on this thread while I'm thinking about it. The other part of this is misinformation. Like maybe somebody is earnestly sharing information that they think is true. But again, if it's not the full picture and it only serves to validate something that they want to be true, but may not necessarily be 100% true, that's another issue that you have to consider. And this is why, friends, we call it mutable madness. Because what the fuck? How am I supposed to know anything ever when somebody could be lying? Somebody could be manipulating the evidence. Somebody could just be telling their version of the story, but then there's another version of the story that we haven't considered. And all of it is wrapped up in a context, in a larger, broader societal context that isn't being explicitly talked about. How do we ever know that anything is true? And if you have, only some of these mutable signs in your chart, or you have no mutable signs in your chart, like there's a particular mode of discernment that you lean on more than others. And it makes it hard to trust the other forms of discernment because, if you're a Pisces and you're skeptical of everything all the time, including yourself, you can't even trust your own gut, or your gut is telling you stories and creating meaning out of things that may not really be happening. If you're a Gemini and you just believe the next newest thing that you hear and you've abandoned all of your principles before, like if you're a Virgo and you're relying on evidence and data that's been tampered with, or if you're a Sagittarius and you're believing in a religion that's inherently white supremacist and patriarchal, like so adding more mutable transits in the sky, yes, it can be helpful in some ways, giving you more to work with, but in others, it can just be even further disorienting. My concern is that because it's Mars, especially, it is going to start. We already know it's because it's Mars, it's going to stir some shit up. Mars disrupts. And so I would anticipate when we talk about the square now between Venus and Gemini, Jupiter and Gemini, in a square with Mars and Virgo, and both of those in a square with Saturn in Pisces. Or wait, sorry. Rewind. We have Jupiter in Gemini and Venus in Gemini in a square with Saturn in Pisces. And Saturn in Pisces is like, la 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 la, I can't hear you. You got Venus and Jupiter over here going yap 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 yap. And this person said, and this person said, and this person said. And then you got Mars and Virgo over here being like, well, actually, according to my calculations, according to this study, but I just saw this, I just read in this book, I just saw in this thing right here that this is what the truth is. It's like, all of these competing sources of information, basically. And you're trying to just figure out what's the truth, what's real, what is real. So, yeah, I would expect Mars and Virgo to come with some kind of replicable, verifiable, concrete, tangible information, data, whatever. I would expect Mars and Virgo to come with the receipts. But because we got these other motherfuckers in the sky and in general with Virgo, we have to still question the validity of said receipts, which is so annoying. But this is where we are. And on top of that, what I was going to say, considering the square between Venus and Mars and also Jupiter and Mars, there's the kind of social obligation and societal context side of Venus and Jupiter together, competing with this differentiating and disrupting evidential side with Mars and Virgo. And if society is becoming more eugenicist, white supremacist, patriarchal, abusive, individualistic, so on and so forth, then, and not to mention Gemini being in the superior position of this square, right? And the hinge point between the opposition that we haven't even talked about between Mars and Virgo and Saturn and Pisces. It's like the Gemini of it all is the agent of chaos, to quote my friend Madison here. The Gemini of it all is the agent of chaos, because somebody can be like, look, I have evidence. And then Gemini can just be like, but what does that really mean? Gemini can be like, but I heard somebody else say, and I really trust this person, so I'm going to go with them. I heard this podcaster say XYZ, and because my biases and beliefs about the world are more congruent with this person who's saying this other thing, I don't really care about that evidence. I don't care if there's been years and years of studies about COVID. I want to go hang out with the homies, and my homies haven't had COVID in 3-4 years, even though they haven't tested. RFK found a study from 7 decades ago that says that vaccines cause autism. And so because me and RFK Jr. agree about everything else, I'm not going to get another vaccine. I don't really care if there's mountains of evidence that say it doesn't cause autism from, the last 5-10 years. I'm just going to go with what he says because I trust him. I don't trust Big Pharma. I don't trust Pfizer. I don't trust Moderna. I don't trust the US government, which you shouldn't trust the US government, but the US government's also being run by corporations. And then you run into this other thing. This is a slight tangent, but something I wanted to complain about, where now we're to a point where us as people struggle to use our own people power, and the corporations, being the ones running the government, are the ones who have to initiate the changes that we want to see as a society, because if they don't, then we withhold our purchasing power. At least ideally, we would withhold our purchasing power from them. We'd stop using their products. But the example I'm thinking about is YouTube deciding to demonetize any videos that use AI, basically. Like that, I believe that use AI as like the narrator and the thing that created the content, because they want monetization to go towards real people, if I'm understanding correctly. So it's like, damn, we can't even as people vote AI out, because for whatever reason, it hasn't been put up to any kind of a vote, despite it being in everything that we use. But YouTube, being the behemoth that it is, has the power to come out and say, okay, well, if you want to use YouTube on our platform, if you want to use AI on our platform, we're not going to monetize your content. And that's like the only power that we can rely on, is like a corporation stepping in and deciding that something is evil. And because they have all their lobbyists in place and they have all their power over the government, like they have more say and stuff like that than we do as people, as consumers. So another reason why people say boycotting is really our biggest power as Americans, because that is kind of the only power we have, is to stop using something, or to complain to a corporation and boycott them and say like, hey, fix it. I hate that. I really resent that. The government's supposed to serve us, not corporations. But the whenever the whenever they find a way to turn corporations into people that the government serves, again, more important context has been left out. So let me see what y'all are saying. I keep thinking of Bannon's stated plan to flood the information field with shit so nobody knows what's true anymore. Yep. I didn't know that that was actually something like stated, but very true. Now, as someone who's a Pisces Sun, Virgo Moon, and Gemini rising, you did not have to come at me like that. At least you know there's somebody who sees you, who understands what it's like inside your mind. It's a mess. No shade to you, but it's a mess. All I can think about is Project Blue / Amazon data center they're trying to build here. There's strong opposition and strong support that are constantly butting heads about what each side deems as facts. Yes. That's wild, because isn't YouTube Google? Yes, actually, that is wild, and that's a good point. I wonder what that means. Because what does Google know? Google's kind of antagonistic towards the government too, aren't they? Interesting. Or rather, Google doesn't want to be controlled by the government, I'll say. Like any of these other corporations don't want to be controlled by the government. So I wonder what's going on behind the scenes there. Because we got the whole Peter Thiel thing going on as well. Chow, my goodness, the underlying manufacturing of consent. Also that. Oh, true. Google has its own AI projects. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Aptly named Gemini, right? Hate to see it. It really is, and unfortunately, that seems to be real difficult. Okay. Meanwhile, they're doing everything they can to reduce our purchasing power and limit our options. Clock that shit, Madison. As a matter of fact, yes, that's such a good point. And oh, my brain is tingling. That makes me think even more about Jupiter and Cancer later. Because remember, we talked about Cancer transit specifically having something to do with consumerism, or at least I've said this a lot, having something to do with consumerism and the power of the consumer coming from their ability to consume. And if you are reducing people's consumer power by inflation or by driving up price gouging, um, by what's it called? Making the products that we consume be things that make us sick or disable us or whatever it is. Like if you're doing all of these things to reduce our purchasing power, you're literally taking away our power. So that's actually something I hadn't thought about. And that's a really good freaking point. Reducing our options, limiting our options as well is a good point because at the end of the day, it's about 5 conglomerates that rule everything in this country. And they have all of their little offshoots. So at the end of the day, we're all giving our money to the same 5 people or the same 5 CEOs or whatever, billionaires. And at that point, the power of the consumer power is also an illusion, right? So we're really in a situation, and I hate being in a situation. So these are the things, right? These are the questions. But I wonder if Mars and Virgo and the disruption that it brings by way of tangible information, like yes, we can consider the ways that this could be bad, but this is like this is our first planet to directly oppose Saturn and Pisces, right? This is our first planet to really kind of push back against this whole la 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 thing that's going on with Saturn and Pisces. And if Mars and Virgo says, hey, walks up and pulls your fingers out of your ears and says, look at it. Look at this. This should freak you out. You should want to protect yourself against this. This is a problem. But I think mostly it's going to be Mars saying, hey, look at this and be impacted by it. The other thing that earth signs do is they make us conform. Sometimes you got to conform to the information that you are seeing. People in Gaza are being starved out right now. You're watching it happen in real time. Literally starved, withheld food, withheld shelter, withheld any kind of remotely safe environment to be in. Look at it. Do something about it. You know, one could only hope that we actually something would happen in that direction with this transit. But at the very least, Earth transits make shit real. So Mars and Virgo low-key scapegoats. Nobody wants to hear that information, so shut up, Virgo. And that is tea. I mean, because Mars, people are usually, as much as Mars itself is rebellious, people are also combative against Mars because it's uncomfortable. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Sometimes the thing that you're witnessing is uncomfortable. And if at the end of the day, Mercury in Cancer is like, I don't like how that feels, and then snaps its finger over to Saturn and Pisces and says, hey, this doesn't feel very good, does it? Let's just not look at it. Or let's tell ourselves a different story about what this all is and what it means and what we can actually do. Because you can take Mercury and the Sun in Cancer with Saturn and Pisces and say, well, there's nothing I can really do about it, so I might as well just live my life. At the end of the day, like, the world is going to be what it's going to be. And, you know, things have been like that in the Middle East for centuries. There's nothing we can do to change it now. So I might as well order something else off of Amazon. Like, you could definitely do that. And then just tell Mars and Virgo that they're lying. Tell Mars and Virgo that they are making a big deal out of nothing. Tell Mars and Virgo that you know, that's just one version of the study. There's another version of this study over here. Have you considered this? There's plenty of ways you could throw a wrench in that. But I do think Mars and Virgo being the first to stand up, or at least to offer some kind of pushback to Saturn and Pisces, is a big deal. And that's why I've been waiting for this transit for so long. The only thing about it that I'm also kind of uncomfortable about, and I'm going to pull cards here in a second, but the other thing about it that I'm a little bit uncomfortable about is the fact that I think Mars and Virgo is going to move on by the time other planets enter Virgo. And in the meantime, we'll have had our Leo and Aquarius eclipses too. So, when does Mars enter Libra? I hate that transit. Ugh. Mars will enter Libra September 13th. So yeah, that's before the sun even enters Virgo. I don't think Mercury enters Virgo by then either. Oh no. No, yeah, Mercury will be in Leo by then. Child, we'll have to talk about that another time. Don't even get me started. So yeah, we won't even have another planet in Virgo with Mars at the same time. So that worries me, or it concerns me. I won't say it worries me, but it concerns me because whatever Mars and Virgo stirs up during this transit in your Virgo house, or in whatever the Virgo house of our uh the Virgo house of our Aries ingress, by the time, like, we won't even really know the implications of that until other planets move through Virgo. But I guess it's only a few days before the sun enters Virgo, so there's at least that. We'll have the sun moving through Virgo before we get Mercury in Virgo, like a month later, or 2-3 weeks later. And so yeah, it'll be a lot of that thing of seeing what's going on, but nobody really has language for it until Mercury enters Virgo. But I don't know. I'm choosing to believe, with my own personal delusion, that this is a necessary transit and that it will hopefully help move us in some direction that we're resisting going right now for whatever reason. But let's ask the Black Tarot. If you haven't already liked the video, please like the video. And if you have a friend who likes to listen to card pulls, tell them I'm about to pull cards right now. Tell them to pull up. I also want to see what y'all are saying in the chat. Y'all are right, because we got to clock the consumerism under this Cancer sun, and do. It's not lost on me that they're reducing my ability to order K-beauty from overseas websites just for them to bring K-beauty to so many US big box stores I'm trying to boycott. That's real and true. Good point. You know, we talked about this. Okay, Mars return, come through. I know this has been one of the better Mars returns for me. I'm kind of sad to see Mars and Leo go. I would like for it to stay here a little bit longer. But alas, we must all get our lashings, I fear. Happy to not be in a Mars-ruled year this time, at least, like I was last year. I can skip the square to my moon from this side. I hope that Mars and Virgo reveals some things to us as well. Irrefutable evidence. One can only hope. All right, one more shuffle like this. All right. To the elevated and healed ancestors and spirits, thank you for allowing us all to come together. Not for allowing us. Thank you for bringing us all together today to discuss what's going on in the sky. We would love to get some insight on this Mars and Virgo transit specifically. What can we expect? What should we focus on, and how do we get through it? We thank you for this day, for your wisdom and your guidance. And we look forward, oh my goodness, to what you have to share. Oh, I'm getting hot. That means it's probably going to be loud. Child, hold on. Because protect that head, you know what I'm saying? All right. Let's go. Context. Bloop. The Magician. Oh, look at that card. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, we have the Magician as our context for this spread. I love to see it, actually. First card, Two of Wands for our situation. Kind of the situation to expect. Next card for our obstacle. Father of Baskets, which is King of Cups. And finally, our solution, our way forward, King of Wands, Father of Wands. Okay. Okay, period. So before I break down each card, I want to sit with this for a second and just see what comes to me. Because if we're talking about the Magician, well, I said I wasn't going to break them down, but I'm going to just talk about them out loud. We're talking about the Magician as the overall context, and it's like having access to multiple different modes of discernment, like I kind of talked about. And then having two King cards with Two of Wands in the beginning, it does feel a little bit like trying to focus your outlook or your vision or your purpose even in how you want to navigate the situation. So intention comes to mind. And then what your intention is rooted in, especially with Father of Wands, King of Wands being the solution. So off the top of my head, this feels like probably because it's the only thing we don't have. It also makes me think that we should probably pay attention to the Sag moons that we have over the next. We might only have one Sag moon during this transit. Let me see. We'll also have the moon in Virgo tomorrow when Mars enters Virgo. So, it's not in my iCal. Oh, yes, it is. Moon will enter Sagittarius on August 5th. It'll be there from August 5th to August 7th. So pay attention to those days. And then, yeah, we have another moon in Sagittarius, September 1st through September 3rd. and then Mars will move on to Libra. So we'll get 2 Moon and Sagittarius transits. But that's just what immediately comes to mind. Let's get into these cards. So the Magician has a lot to work with. It is one of our major arcana that says, like, hey, you have access to a little bit of everything. Get creative with your tools. In a way, it feels like you can do anything if you put your mind to it and you make good use of your resources, right? But it's saying something about having access to a lot and having to just be versatile, adaptable, and kind of clever with your resources. So with that as the context, it does show something about having a lot to work with. And I think that could speak to some of the information overload that we've been talking about, but it could also be talking about being given a new tool with this transit coming up. Being given a new tool to work with. And like I said, yeah, to get creative with that. 2 of Wands then in our situation position. 2 of Wands. 2s typically say something about feeling split or divided or pulled in different directions. And 2 of Wands, with Wands having to do with vision and intention and you know, the fire of the will and creativity and things like that. It's like trying to decide where to go next or what to do next or what the way forward is. And I think in order to decide the way forward, you again have to have some kind of a goal or a place that you want to end up so that you're not just wandering aimlessly. I mean, you can wander aimlessly. There is some value to wandering / wondering and curiosity and that thirst for knowledge and novel experiences, but that can also lead to you just kind of either staying still sometimes because of analysis paralysis, decision paralysis, or it can just look like doing a little bit of everything with no real intention, with no real plan. So I think 2 of Wands as a situation just shows that we are in a position where we maybe are a little bit unorganized and need to figure out what it is that we even want, where it is that we even want to go. So some of the remedies to that would be some of the ways to kind of harness the energy of the 2 of Wands is to imagine and envision outcomes that you would like to see or places you would like to go. And I would say even under this current sky, if we're talking about mutable madness, if we're talking about Mars and Virgo, it is planning out once you've decided on where you want to go, planning out the steps to get there, or just having some kind of a plan A, plan B, plan C, so that if you do get derailed or if you do have to go in a different direction, you can adapt, like we said here with the Magician. But the point of the 2 of Wands is to say, you want to go somewhere. It's just a matter of where and why. Father of Baskets as the obstacle immediately is making me think about Mercury and Cancer, like we've been talking about this whole time, because this is cups. Cups have to do with water, the body, our emotions. And King of Cups usually is someone who is, no matter what's going on around them, they are calm. And not even just calm, but they are able to navigate chaos in a way that is confident and secure and kind of just rolling with the punches being the waves of your own emotional landscape or emotional environment if it's something outside of you. And we know that the whole struggle for cardinal signs is trying to control something outside of you as a way to control what's going on within you. So King of Cups shows that the struggle right now is to find your center, find something within you that feels at peace, even when things are not peaceful, finding something within you that is stable that you can return to and find safety in. This is a lot of what we talk about with emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is not always putting on a brave face, always being calm and having no emotional reaction to uh to the world around you. It's not about always being calm. Regulation is the ability to feel your feelings as they come up and respond to them in a way that's appropriate to the actual situation at hand. And when you think about that in the context of the trine between Cancer and Pisces right now, it can feel difficult to know if you're overreacting or not, or like what the appropriate emotional response is to something. But I think the regulation of it all is before you act, sit and really feel the feeling first. Let the feeling pass through. Build up your emotional tolerance to chaos and disruption so that when you are in a chaotic or disruptive situation, you can still find ways to either quickly calm down or to think through the chaos, right? So this is really a lot about just finding your center, finding a way to be grounded, finding a way to um, move forward even when things get out of control, especially if you are finding yourself being dysregulated by new evidence or new information. So that kind of takes me back to Two of Wands then, that says like Two of Wands is kind of a means to finding your center. Like if you know what you're trying to accomplish by the actions that you're taking, then that ends up being your center. That ends up being the thing that's grounding you. That ends up being your motivation that says, okay, I know all this other stuff is going on. I'm not giving up on this thing that I have my focus on. It's reminding me of when I was in yoga, when I was a yoga teacher, and we learned balancing poses where you're usually like standing on one leg while you're doing other stuff with your upper body. Your foot is your foundation. So the two things they would tell you to focus on was um your feet, like kind of gripping and um kind of gripping into the ground for stability, but also they call it your drishti, your gaze, which is finding something in front of you to focus on so that if if you're if you have a focal point, um you can zero in on that focal point, and then whatever happens with the rest of your body, you can still find stability, or at least find an easier way to come back to center, return to the thing that you're focusing on. Because if you are trying to stand on one leg and you're looking around everywhere, that's just going to feel even more off balance and ungrounded and decentered. But find one thing to focus on. Suddenly you can focus in on your breath because you're just looking at one thing. Focus on breathing. That brings your nervous system down. It helps you relax into the shape. Same thing with mountain biking. When they talk about learning how to corner, what they tell you to do with mountain biking in general is to look where you want to go. Don't look where you want to go, because if you look where you don't want to go, you're going to go there. If I'm coming into a turn and I'm focused on the tree that's at the corner of that turn, I'm going to go into the tree, or at least very close to it. But if I'm turning and I'm constantly looking ahead on the trail and I know that turn is coming up and I follow my gaze around, my body is also going to follow with it, right? So I think that's what those two cards together, Two of Wands and Father of Baskets, are really talking about, right? And these are tools that the magician is saying, like, hey, you have these, by the way, they're already within you. And then finally, Father of Wands as the solution. I think it's really that ability that I'm talking about here, that is really, really just the power of focusing your attention, like the power of being disciplined and being the power of being disciplined and self-led and kind of an authority over yourself in a way. Not maybe not quite like the emperor when they're talking about like structure in that sense, but there's something about like the King of Wands that is like, it's almost like, yeah, I can do anything. But in the context of Mars and Virgo, it's not about overestimating your abilities. It's more about, I think, following through. I think this card is interesting as well because it does show someone who is kind of a teacher or a guide who is explaining whatever's going on in uh this like diagram, and they're kind of teaching it to these other people. You only become the king once you've had all of the experiences that give you the knowledge and the wisdom to share with other people. So I think this could also say something about being mindful of the information that you take in, the information that you share, because misinformation everywhere. But I think it really does speak to the wisdom and the power and the wisdom required to be a leader, even if the only person that you're leading is yourself. The wisdom, and I think even the like when we talk about withholding with earth signs, it's not just withholding good things from you, it's also like not acting on impulse, right? Um if we think about, say, maybe Aries and Cancer, um how sometimes they do move on impulse, or sometimes they just, once they have their mind made up, like they're going to do whatever it takes to get there. And sometimes like there are implications for that. But I think King of Wands speaks a little bit more to, again, when you have that plan, when you have that focus, when you know where it is that you're trying to go, and you follow along on those plans, and you're adaptable to the circumstances, then you can move a little bit more intuitively. Like, you can move intuitively in the sense that your body helps fill in the gaps where you may not have been able to make the plan. Your vision, I don't know, it's like, and maybe I'm just repeating myself saying this in a bunch of different ways, but it's like no matter what happens, I have my back. I will figure it out. I will find a way. And maybe what Mars in Virgo does is illuminate another way or another path to get to this destination, whatever it is that we're trying to get to, whether that's on a personal or collective level. Mars and Virgo comes along to say, "Hey, have you tried this? Like, I know everyone else is going this way, but have you tried doing it this way? What resources are available for you?" Or rather, if we're talking about resources, since we're talking about Earth and the magician in this case, there's something to be said for, yeah, other people are going this way and doing it this way because they have these certain resources, but you don't have those resources. You don't have that information. You don't have that guidance or whatever it is. So you have to rely on something else. What do you have? And actually being able to turn and look at what you do have, which also starts from, which I think you can also only do from that place of being grounded and centered within yourself, so that you're not trying to replicate something that somebody else has done, or replicate an outcome that somebody else has created for themselves. It's like there's a little bit of that self-trust of, okay, I know it's not going to look like that. It's going to have to look like this. And these are the things that I have that can help me get to that point. But I have to go inward and actually trust like the skills and the things that I possess within, and rely on that to be my guide. So I would say, with all the confusion that may come up, um, finding a way to stay with yourself through it all, and going back to the whole intention thing, like what it is that you believe, what it is that feels right to you, um, and trusting your own process, really important. And it's weird because a lot of this feels very Leo to me for some reason, but I think it's because there's going to be so many Leo transits, including Mercury and Leo during this, um, during Mars and Virgo, and those Aquarius, because it sounds a little Aquarius too, the Aquarius and Leo eclipses. So I'm sure all of that factors in as well. But at the end of the day, the message is always trust yourself. The message is always trust yourself. The question is always, why are you struggling to trust yourself right now? So yeah. What do y'all think? What do you guys think about that? Oh, the white hat's matching in real life and in the card. I didn't even realize that. I already put the card away, but cute. We love to see it. Yeah, I can't find it now, but I need this administration to hurry up and turn on each other. And it is happening. And at the very least, their supporters are turning on them. You can count on that. Especially with this whole Epstein thing. They're like, hold on. I thought the whole point of this was to protect the kids and to not put up with sex trafficking. Well, we've been trying to tell y'all ass that that man himself is a predator, but y'all don't care. Y'all didn't care. So, behold the consequences of your ignorance and actions. That's what happened when you subscribe to white supremacy. You end up with a lot of weird fuck shit. A lot of this Saturn in Pisces is always waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never does. How can I trust the shoe to not drop when in the past it always has? How do I trust my feeling that it won't? Like, self-trust is so complicated. Self-trust is complicated. Like, when I think about self-trust, and this is not a complete answer, these are just thoughts. But when I think about self-trust for myself as someone who has Gemini rising, Gemini moon rising, I think about how quickly I dismiss myself. How quickly I dismiss myself, how quickly I dismiss all of the information that I've ever learned, how quickly I assume that I'm the person who probably got it wrong or misunderstood something. So then I have to ask myself, okay, why do I not have more faith in why do I not have more faith in myself whenever I've made such an effort to almost overcompensate for the fact that I don't trust myself, right? And trusting myself, trusting yourself, to me is not about being right or wrong, and I think that's where I know this sounds weird, but I think that's where we get it fucked up is like we think, and maybe this is related to Mars and Virgo as well, or just Mercury and wanting to see things as right or wrong, black and white. But maybe it's all the mutable signs, right? There's something about us wanting to see things as right or wrong, and that it's always going to be right or wrong. What I think the truth is, and this also speaks to like things around secure attachment, is that it's less about being right or wrong and more about trusting yourself to figure it out, to figure out whatever it is that you need to figure out along the way. Like if you take the good and bad, right or wrong out of all of the decisions that you made, then you just have actions and outcomes, right? And the faith isn't about avoiding bad outcomes because to be alive is to suffer. To be alive is to sometimes you're going to have you're going to have an experience that doesn't feel very good. You're going to have experiences that are going to challenge you. You're going to have experiences that really test you, not to be right or wrong, but to have learned from the last time you had that experience, which to me is very Saturn. So I feel like the self-trust is not about making the right decision because, again, the right or correctness is subjective in and of itself. But instead of letting the subjectivity of correctness be the thing that disorients you or that freaks you out or that makes you feel like you don't have the right answer, it's instead saying like, okay, because it's subjective, that means that it doesn't have to mean that it's right or wrong. It just means, did I learn? If I made a decision that had an outcome that I didn't like or that didn't feel very good to me, what decision do I need to make next time to not do that again? Because to some extent, you're always going to have a new experience because this is the first time you've ever lived. Because we are creatures of habit, we tend to repeat things over and over and over and over and over again because the devil you know, right? And sometimes the devil you know feels correct. Sometimes just having a new experience, whether it feels good or not, is maybe correct because you've done something else, right? So I know that sounds confusing, but it's like trying to train yourself to not see your decisions as good or bad unless you know you're about to repeat something that you didn't like previously. Because nobody else can tell you, like nobody else can really tell you that you've made a wrong decision if the vision that they have for you is different than the vision you have for yourself. Now, obviously, there are going to be some things like you shouldn't kill or hurt other people, like intentionally, you know? Um, you shouldn't like, I don't know, if you're gonna if you know you're gonna do something that's going to cause harm to other people and you know like that's going to be the outcome, and you have this is where a lot of people don't like this conversation, but like if you personally don't want to hurt other people because that's a value that you have or a moral belief that you have, then you're going to do things in life that are going to lead you to not hurting people, right? And at the same time, if you're so attached to this idea that like not hurting people means I'm a good person, and then you have a situation where you hurt somebody, then what? It's like now your whole entire identity was wrapped up in doing this thing, but then you have to then you have to consider other things like, okay, if like someone tells me I hurt them because I made a decision that I thought was right for me, like yes, the impact was that this person was hurt, and also that's where the whole like that wasn't my intention thing comes in. You can acknowledge that this person was hurt by a decision that you thought was right for you, and that you made a decision that you thought was right for you. And then you can take that experience and then moving forward, you can decide, okay, next time I'm in this situation, I'm going to do this instead to hopefully stay within integrity for myself, but to also like, or mostly I'm going to make this decision moving forward to stay in integrity with myself, whatever that means. But like sometimes you're going to do things that hurt other people that really are in your best interest. And it's like not because you're trying to hurt that other person, but because you're trying to protect yourself. And sometimes that just sucks, right? You have to let that person feel how they feel. And then you also have to deal with the guilt and the shame that comes up of doing this thing that felt out of integrity for you. But if you've also been conditioned that being a good person only looks this one specific way and you try to do something outside of that, that is going to feel like you're doing something wrong, right? So I'm saying all of this just to say like good and bad, right and wrong, correct and incorrect are all subjective to the person having that experience. And all these mutable transits can create all kinds of justifications for anything that you do. So you can either let that be something that keeps you from moving forward, or you can let it be something that helps you refine what is right or wrong to you, and then let that be the thing that guides you. So I don't know. Um, Weird way to say it. If there's a way that you hear me say that and it sounds better to you, use that, right? Because I'm just some guy. But I do feel like putting less pressure on yourself to be correct or incorrect, right or wrong, whatever, really helps navigate the whole trust thing, self trust thing. Because trust is, I trust myself to figure it out. I trust myself that no matter what happens, I will get through it. No matter what happens, whatever decision I make, there will be more decisions that I have to make. Like, I trust that there will be more decisions that I have to make, and I trust myself to make them. And I trust myself to learn from the experiences that I have due to those decisions. Like, to me, that's self trust and discernment. So that's a good question. The other shoe dropping, I mean, I would say sometimes the other shoe is going to drop. What are you going to do about it? Instead of avoiding the shoe dropping, have a plan. Okay, let's say the shoe does drop. What am I going to do about it? I don't think it would make sense for you to If your body is constantly worried that the shoe is gonna drop, I don't think it makes sense to just tell yourself like, "Hey, everything's gonna be fine, like, the other shoe's not gonna drop, nothing bad's gonna happen." Something bad might happen. Something bad might happen, but guess what? Something good also might happen. If you wanna think in goods or bads, like, maybe it will. Maybe the main thing that I'm really afraid of is not so much the other shoe dropping, but that I'm gonna have a new experience that I don't know how to navigate. Because the other underlying thing of all of this, when we're talking about trust, the opposite of trust isn't necessarily distrust. I think the opposite of trust is uncertainty. Because then you just don't know. And not knowing is scary. And it makes sense to be afraid of the unknown. I'm not going to be a person who tells you that you shouldn't be afraid of the unknown and you should be courageous and charge forward all the time. I just think the unknown is scary. So if we go back to the whole King of Cups as the obstacle, like, how do you navigate uncertainty? How do you find peace within yourself when you know that you don't know how something is going to turn out? And I think that's different for everybody. That's why I'm like, this is what you do. I don't know what you do. What works for you. Maybe affirmations do work for you. Maybe telling yourself and affirming to yourself that you have the tools and you will be okay works for you. Maybe you need to go sit down and meditate and journal. Maybe you need to go for a run. Maybe you need to go for a walk. I don't know. Whatever works for you to bring you back to whatever is center for you. Um, you got to figure out what that is for yourself. And um the whole point of I don't like there needs to be another word from it besides regulate. Because regulate to be regulated is to respond, right? But this place of coming bringing yourself back to this place of, I guess I'm just calling it, of center. Bringing yourself back to center just means you are being affected, but you're being affected from a place where you can think clearly still, versus just like your decisions being based on how you feel in a given moment, like purely based on the id, as Freud would call it, the the part of you that this is okay. This is what I'll say, and I'll end on this. Unless I keep going, I don't know, but I'll end on this. Um, Center. I think being centered in the context of mutable signs and Pisces, if you will, since that seems to be the main culprit with Saturn there, being centered, I think, means responding to the version that you are today in the present moment versus responding to a past version of you, past younger, um, naive, unexperienced version of you. Because you've had experiences. You wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for all of the experiences you've had up to this point. There is wisdom and knowledge and insight in all of the experiences you've ever had. So, how today can you find the version of yourself that exists today that learned from all of these experiences and can do something? Back to the magician, can do something with everything you've ever experienced and use that wisdom and knowledge and insight to move forward. That's what I would call being centered, because when you're off your center, when you're dysregulated, that's a younger past version of you that feels like they don't know anything and can't figure out how to move. And that's a valid part of your humanity that does exist to keep you safe and say, hey, shit, this is new. Ah, this is new. Then the older version of you has to come through and say, okay, this is new. We're not dying. We might be a little unsafe, but we're here. We have access to something. What can we work with? You don't obviously have to immediately go there, but I think the part when you're like, okay, we feel unsafe. Younger version of me. This is very chaotic and scary. I'm here with you. And then whatever activity you need to do to kind of move through the feeling and get to that centered place and say, okay, I'm here with you. That's when you become the person that you are today in this present moment, your personal inner adult. I'm here. Now. Now what? So yeah, that's what I think those cards are talking about. And I actually think that makes a lot of sense because that is kind of the energy that I've had about just looking at these transits a year out and not knowing what it was going to look like. But now that we're here, I can see how it just feels really dysregulating. But we got to figure out how to move forward anyway. So, yeah. I think we can do it. And like, not to be the Saturn guy, the 8th house sun guy, 8th house Mercury guy, but if you die, then you're dead. Not really much you can do about it after that. You don't have to worry about anything else after that. Unless, you believe in Judgment Day and having to go meet your maker and all that other stuff. That's your business. But if you die, you die. not really your problem after that. So if you die, then you're dead. Capricorn. It'd be like that sometimes. So to live is to suffer. That same Capricorn. Look, somebody has to say it. We're not going to feel good all the time. That's not realistic. I'm counting on y'all to, to live and to feel joy in things, because you have that capacity as well. You got to figure that out, because it's got to feel good and feel joyous and authentic to you. So I trust y'all to figure that part out. But we often fear the death and the suffering, and it's like, well, that's going to happen because you're alive. If you never feel suffering, you're probably on drugs. But guess what? Being on drugs forever to feel good is also going to kill you eventually. So, oh, Samaje, you missed all the good shit. It'll be here for you. It'll be here for you to listen back to, though. This really ate. I think you'll appreciate it. But yeah. To live is to die. So but whatever you do with the parts in between that, I mean, have faith in yourself to drive the boat. You know what I mean? So glad we could end on such a high note. I hope y'all laugh at that. Because even though I'm being dead ass, I'm also joking. So let it free you. Let it liberate you from the prison of your own mind. Cool. If you enjoyed this live, please like the video, comment, subscribe. If you're watching back later, let me know what you think. I'm wishing everyone what am I wishing you guys? I'm wishing everyone at least an ounce, if not more, of self-trust, faith in yourself, and just a wonderful day, a wonderful week, a wonderful time. If nothing else, we'll all get through it together. And yeah, fuck with y'all the long way. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. Thanks for doing Astro with me. It's my favorite. Astrology is so much better with friends. So I appreciate y'all, and I will talk to you next week. Yeah, that's it. Bye-bye.